Akhenaten, I keep bringing this up to people, but those weird statues where they say he looks like an alien. I mean, maybe he's a snake man, but keep in mind, he's severely inbred, worse than the Habsburg.
Yeah.
He's inbred more than a Habsburg. His head's going to look a little weird. There's 40 planets in the solar system. The surface of the moon, if you're on it, the sky looks yellow. No, we can't go explore. The whole solar system is under the rule of the serpent race. I want to make it clear that I'm a good person who's prejudiced naturally against Muslims. Like all good people. The power structure lies down the pyramid at you, but people are shitty and ambitious and lying their way up the pyramid. The most racist occult magic is how it's lying. That's the first reality-altering magic there is. Oh, you're not allowed to trash either side. You have to just shut up. Like the law of you wouldn't kind to His Majesty. In the future, a blind eye will serve you better. Exactly. They know to some degree the show they're at. Wrestling fans know it's fake. They just like it.
Yeah.
But they expect their dollar's worth of show. So as long as you're fulfilling that, they're not going to be mad at you. You know what I mean? You got to fulfill your showmanship. They paid their money. These old ladies want a certain show they're going to get. It's not like a stripper. It's like a spiritual thing, but they want that show. They know you're full of shit, a lot of them.
Thanks for having me, Kurt, and thanks for plugging the show. It's great. A lot of your listeners have been tuning into some of the shows, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, you got a lot of the first one I told you. The first one I found was your Egyptian crowd control one about the pharaohs, and the thing about so my friend Mike Malice has that Wallace Budge book, that you were talking about. I guess he's like supposedly the real Indiana Jones, and I've never read it. But was your take on it that it was just a form of OCD institutionalized for their religions for these pharaohs? Is that Wallace Budge's assessment, or that's what you took from reading it?
That's what I took from the whole thing after years of research. But Budge was good because he was a pure Egyptologist. He was there at the time when the excavations were going on. So he had first-hand knowledge. So Budge is a very credible person to look into when we're talking about this Egyptology, which now has become anything from space aliens to, or ancient aliens and all this stuff. It's kind of muddied the waters to the point where history can be anything you want it to be. And I like history to be decoded and look at the outcomes. What is the driver of the outcome? And with the pharaohs, they were poster boys for the priesthood. So this is a very important thing to talk about, I think, because we're talking about systems of government, and I've covered that quite a lot.
Oh yeah, well, I think it is a very important thing to talk about because when you think about how inbred, Akhenaten, I keep bringing this up to people, but those weird statues where they say he looks like an alien. I mean, maybe he's a snake man, but keep in mind he's severely inbred, worse than those European ones where they just died out. I'm blanking on their name, the Spanish family, the Habsburgs.
Yes.
He's inbred more than a Habsburg. His head's going to look a little weird. Okay. And
yes. And also I think that they were grossly exaggerating the looks of the people, because I've been to the British Museum and I've seen a lot of the statues. I've been to Egypt, I've been to the pyramids, and it looks like they're glorifying to the extent that they look actually as though they're not really human. And that is the point, I think, that they were representing themselves as the gods to the people.
Yeah, right. And Interesting. Well, you look like really wealthy people now, like Larry Ellison creep. All these people get so much work done. They look like it. My cuckoo theory about aliens in the day is that they're interdimensional trillionaires that transhumaned, and now they can't transhuman back. So,
that's their problem, isn't it? And I think that you've made a good point in a way, because what is the purpose of this type of governance, the governance that we see on the planet at the moment? It doesn't really have any positive and useful outcomes. So therefore, I talk about the creation of a new civilization. And then I look back at older civilizations to see how they prepared for what was going on. And that took us back, of course, to the Druids and ancient Britain and the Shattered Isles series, which really took me a long time to get into. And I did a lot of research on it, and a lot of stuff points that way. But what they were very aware of was that cataclysms could be incoming at any time, and there needed to be a priest class and people in different regions who could communicate with each other if anything happened, and places for them to go. Therefore, the dolmens, which they say dolmens and cromlechs. Dol is a stone table. That's what it means. We have a lot of these in Britain, and they go, of course, right across to Normandy. They've even got them in Korea. But I believe they were kind of primitive bomb shelters where people would go to get away from the incoming debris, because there have been these cometary catastrophes. We're living in a very, very peaceful time environmentally at the moment. The Earth has gone through absolutely cataclysmic changes and people have been wiped out. And that's why it's important that if this happens again, that there are people on the planet who can communicate with each other in different areas and be able to actually start something again. Because what we see is everything's dumbing down. We're seeing the end of a civilization, which is why I find this theory and concept of government so important.
Yeah, well, actually, Mark is messaging me. I guess we have those dolmens in the northeast coast here in America. I didn't know that. We have
what's interesting is they're turning up in lots of different places, and they're categorized differently, you see, because in Britain they were also called passage graves, and there's a place called West Kennet Long Barrow, and I went in there. It's got megaliths outside. It's very near Stonehenge, but you go in and there's 4 rooms in there. Why would they build an underground chamber where you can conceal the entrance merely as a burial site? It doesn't make sense. You just bury the people. I know we had mausoleums, but what they're saying now is that in the excavations, they're saying, well, the skeletons that were put in there way after these things were built and used. So they were used as graves afterwards. So we're going back to something which really fascinated me. And I got into the work of William Comyns Beaumont through a friend of mine who curated the books from the du Maurier family, because he was related into them.
What's the du Maurier thing? I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, well, I thought it was completely nuts, Kurt. I thought it was completely nuts that Britain had been the center of this civilization. We haven't got time to get into all that tonight, but if you look at Britain shattered
I know a bunch of people that are high up and elite definitely think that. I mean, without a doubt. The whole thing we have now, I keep bringing up tragedy and hope to everybody ever since my Rabbi Richard Grove sent it to me. That Anglo-American world power, and even America going back to, what's his name? Is it Bacon? The one that wrote Shakespeare's plays.
My guest today on this presentation is Jim Egan, the curator of the Newport Tower Museum in Newport, Rhode Island, and the author of many books, including Elizabethan America, The John Dee Tower of 1583. And there are several other books written by him as well. You can find these all on Amazon.com. As he shall explain, he believes that the antique landmark known as the Newport Tower was designed by John Dee as a camera obscura and horologium for gathering astronomical data. His website is newporttowermuseum.com.
I've absorbed some of your information that I found, and I think I found you through a business partner of Dan Winter mentioned you to me, because I'd become interested in John Dee, and he said, oh, you gotta check out this guy. He says that John Dee created America, basically, and came up with the whole idea. And so I started checking you out, and I feel like I've only got a thimbleful of, an idea even of what you're about and what you've come up with here. It's amazing what you've done, actually. How is it that you have a museum next to this tower and that you say was created by John Dee?
The John Dee part of it came later. What really fascinated me was this building. I'm a member of the New England Antiquities Research Association. We study lithic structures, stone structures all throughout New England. Stone chambers, there are stone cairns, there are fields of stones. A lot of it is Native American stonework. Some of it might be earlier. It might be Celtic stonework. We're not really sure. But there's hundreds of sites all across New England. But the strangest site of all, lithic structure, is this building that's right in the middle of Newport, Rhode Island. And it's a circular tower that's 28 feet tall. It's circular, and it has 80 pillars that hold up the large walls that go around it. And it used to have 2 floors in it. You can see where the floorboards on it. And as a member of this amateur New England Antiquities Research Association, one of my fellow members was a fellow by the name of William Penhollow, and he's a professor of astronomy and physics at the University of Rhode Island for 30 years. Very smart scholar, and he decided to start studying the tower. And he found that there were astronomical alignments in the windows of the tower. In the first floor room of the tower, there are 3 windows, the northeast window, the west window, and the south window. And at various times, like, for example, on the winter solstice, the sun shines right in one window, through the tower, right out another window, and you observe it from one corner of the park. And then he found another alignment that dealt with a lunar aspect, which is called lunar minor, which is an event that happens once every 18.6 years. So he wrote an article about it, and it was a 7-page article and printed in the New England Antiquities Research Association Journal. And he even gave a talk at the American Astronomical Society in Chicago about it. And but the paper was so complex and so many details that nobody really followed up on it. And the people who in Chicago listened to him, oh, that's fine, but people in Chicago and other states aren't really interested in some building in Rhode Island, some obscure building. So he kind of got lost. And so I said, well, I'm a professional photographer, and I'll look at the data in his work and go and photograph on the exact times. He gives the specific times and dates and where you stand and everything to see these alignments. And I went there, and he was right. I mean, every year the sun comes through these 2 windows, and I've observed for the last 20 years, every December 21st. And then every lunar minor, which has happened a couple of times in the last 20 or 30 years, every 18.6 years happens. That event happens as well. And There's another North Star alignment. So the building has astronomical alignments. That's very unusual,
This is something that was chalked up to being a windmill. Is that right?
Well, there are 5 theories about who built the tower. The Vikings in 1150, the Templars in 1398, the Chinese in 1421, the Portuguese in 1501, and the first governor of Rhode Island calls this building a windmill in the year 1677. In his final will, first governor of Rhode Island calls it my stone-built windmill. So that's what people have suspected that's what it was, because the first governor called it that, and the whole thing. Well, I studied the first governor, and I studied the will, and I studied all of these things, and I found out that this guy knew about who built the tower, but he didn't build it. This was not an architectural style that would have been used in the colonial era. They built out of wood back then, and they didn't build out of stone. They didn't build circular. They didn't use pillars. And to say that it's a windmill, there's so many doubts about that. In other words, all windmills at the time were made out of wood, and they all tapered to the top because they had a turret at the top that had these blades that faced towards the wind. Continuously had to move around. And so this tower does not taper, and the top is 24 feet. So this would be a 24-foot turret that you would somehow have to move towards the wind. That's very unusual. And then windmills have a horizontal shaft that goes to a vertical shaft, and then 2 grindstones are down below. Well, why would you have an open arcade on a windmill? Well, the grain's going to blow away. So some people say, well, maybe the windmill stones were on the first floor. Well, about 8 feet away from the center of the first floor, where it would be, is a fireplace. And the last thing you put in a windmill is a fireplace, because one spark, they could explode the whole thing. And the building is just not designed torque-wise to hold the twist of a windmill. So it's not a windmill. So I started studying the first governor, and I found out he knew about the tower. He knew about the whole thing, about how it all worked. And so as I was doing it one day, I was in the library, and I saw this book, and it said Historical Names for Narragansett Bay. And the top of the list was Verrazano, who came here in 1525, and he was sailing for the French king, and he came across this beautiful bay, which is the whole center part of our state. And he said, this bay is big enough for an entire navy. He called it Refugio, a place of refuge for an entire navy. And he went back to France, wrote about it, and so everybody in Europe knew about this bay. Well, the English wanted to get a foothold in the New World, and they knew that Spain was becoming a superpower, and they had all the gold from Mexico and silver from Peru, so they decided to choose one place for the first colony. Well, the guy who was in charge of this was a guy by the name of John Dee, and on the list of the names for Narragansett Bay, it said 1583, the John Dee Bay and River. And I'm like, why would this bay be named after John Dee? And, I knew of him as a scholar, as for the whole magic tradition, and guy who created a library and such, and I don't believe that the bay was named after him. So I did studies and read more about it, and I found out, indeed, this was the site in 1578. He was the Queen's philosopher, and he had written these 8 books telling the Queen she had a legal right to all of North America, because earlier Englishmen like King Arthur and Prince Madoc and John Sebastian Cabot had been to the New World and claimed it for England. And he said, we need to get a foothold there because Spain's becoming a superpower. They have 200 ships in their fleet. We got 20 ships. If they want to attack, it's all over. We're going to be all Spanish territory. So encouraged him to do so. And a month after he made this presentation to the Queen, she deeded all of North America to this guy by the name of Sir Humphrey Gilbert. And Gilbert was a great leader of men. He was a general in the war in Ireland, and he was very enthusiastic about setting up a colony in the New World. They were also trying to explore for the Northeast and Northwest Passage to try and open up trade with China and Japan.
Okay, so when you say she deeded this to this Sir Humphrey guy, she gave the land to him?
That's correct. All of North America, north of Florida, was deeded to Sir Humphrey Gilbert. He was just a polymath, and he was just curious about all these interesting things, and he felt he was destined to save the world, or at least, change the world. And sure enough, the British Empire later became the largest empire the world's ever known. He sparked it. English is the main language used for trade today. All of this stuff sparks from Dee and his incredible dreams, his great mission. It did work out, even though he died in poverty, and most people don't know his name and don't want to study it. But he was incredibly influential. People will understand this in the next half century and century. We're not at a time where we can get Dee, I don't think.
You have a whole book on how you think that John Dee collaborated with Shakespeare to write at least some of his plays, and I know that Shakespeare is one of the main contributors to modern English, the way we talk now. So that would be yet another influence on the modern English-speaking world that John Dee contributed to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. John Dee was born in 1527, and he died in 1609. Queen Elizabeth, she reigned from 1558 to 1603. William Shakespeare, depending on who you think he was born probably around 1564. So again, Dee 1527, Shakespeare 1564, maybe 1550. So he was a much younger guy. So Dee was the older statesman, the wise person, and they all learned from each other. And so these two people, Shakespeare, whoever he was, and John Dee, both lived in the same town. And it wasn't that big a town. We're not talking about huge cities like New York nowadays. London was a smaller, there aren't that many people there. So these are the two smartest guys in Elizabethan history. You're trying to tell me they don't know each other? You can go to any encyclopedia and look up The Tempest by Shakespeare, and they'll all tell you that the character Prospero was inspired by John Dee. I mean, it's just not a question. He had all the books. He was into the magical thing. He had the big long white beard. He wanted to learn all of this stuff, polymath. So I started reading that, and I realized that The Tempest was a sort of story that is a reflection of this colonization effort of 1583 that I had been studying about. So I wrote this whole book about it. It's called Shakespeare and John Dee Co-Wrote The Tempest. And people are like, oh, yeah, right, sure, John Dee. Well, it's a 627-page book in which I explain that a lot of the characters in The Tempest are based on the main players in the Elizabethan colonization effort of the 1580s. Gonzalo is Sir Humphrey Gilbert. Anthony Brigham, who built this tower, is Antonio. And so I read this whole book about it, and people, first off, they don't know who Shakespeare is. Secondly, they don't see a connection between John Dee and Shakespeare, but someday they will.
The competing conspiracy theory or whatever twist on history that has been proffered before was that Francis Bacon was the real author of Shakespeare's plays, And I know that there's a little bit of a time gap between the time of Dee and the time of him, but there's another guy whose ideas were influential in promoting the idea of America as this new Atlantis. Was the whole Shakespeare project not part of the British Empire project? Was there a presently misunderstood motivation behind the stuff produced by Shakespeare?
Well, no, you're absolutely right there. On a certain level, a lot of Shakespeare's plays were political propaganda. And I think they were written by a courtier, somebody who was trying to get his point of view across and influence the masses. People know that's how you get people excited about it. So, regarding Shakespeare, there are these theories that it was Sir Francis Bacon. Other people think that it was the Earl of Oxford, Edward the Thief. And there are all these, competing theories. That's a whole other debate. I don't want to get into now. There's a whole other conversation.
Sure.
But the point is, yes, there is a connection with the New World and what's called the Virginia Company that was helping to found the New World.
Yes.
And these are all the same guys, the same courtiers.
What happened to Dee's deed?
His deed?
Yeah, to Canada, essentially. Didn't he have the deed at one point?
That became void once Sir Humphrey Gilbert drowned.
Oh.
Who wanted America?
Yeah, well, there's some controversy about that, Kurp, because my friend Nick Ollerstrom's written a book, and he reckons it was William de Vere who wrote the Shakespeare plays. But
really, de Vere?
Yeah, I would say that it was more likely to be a group of people because the plays actually got worse, and it ends with Cymbeline, which is probably his worst ever play. So if you keep writing plays, it's like if you go on stage, you usually get better, don't you? You don't get worse at something usually, unless there's like lots of
the writers. It's like a Harvard Lampoon situation.
Yeah,
like I wrote a lot of shows, and I got friends. I've seen TV shows where like I could tell when my friend worked on it, stopped working there because it's immediately not as well written. If you really know a lot of writers. I never heard that. That's very interesting. The play is very interesting about Shakespeare. I didn't know that at all. But anyway, they thought this was New Atlantis, and half the founding father. I just saw a thing that George Washington, like our flag is off his family's coat of arms. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I knew about the beginnings of the American flag through those books and the way it was changed and where it came from. I mean, the idea of the New Atlantis fits in perfectly with Britain as the center of global power, which it saw itself as with the social engineers who are now implementing the Agenda 2030 goals are really out of the City of London. These are just new systems of governance all coming from the same place, but none of them have been very successful. And this is, I think, the key point that it's all about management of ourselves. I think that's really important at this particular point because a lot of people get very disempowered when they're looking into this stuff. And I love going down these rabbit holes. I love the occult. But the thing is that a lot of this stuff is actually about management of people, and it's very, very simple. And I think that that's the main driver of the shows over the past 5 or 10 years, really. Because once you know the basics, you think, okay, let's really take this apart and make it simple. How are people controlled according to their genetics, according to their programming? That once you know that, a lot of other stuff will just fall into place rather than going it's Republican, Democrat, or it's the Tories and Labour Party.
It's such an obvious.
Yeah, I know. It's
two-lie system, you called it. You're right. It's a two ass cheeks. It really is amazing. The people that are like high up in I know people that are. They're friends with like big politicians and stuff, right? And they would look down on like a Crip or a Blood, but they use the same colors and they have the same setup.
Yeah, we're talking about a global mafia here. It's always the same template. This is what I found really interesting with governance, especially now since we got into what's called Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. The way that works global to local is very, very simple. It's through infiltration, NGOs, stakeholders. And of course, it's all about financial parasitism. It's got nothing to do with the environment whatsoever. Right. And that's why I thought, we're talking about the fourth world,
Oh, yeah, that's a good reason.
Like that. It's kind of interesting because it's kind of the background to the governance system as it is now. I mean, what we're having, globally, the disruptions, the wars and so on. The interesting thing about it is that the global to local thing is where people can actually take back their own power.
Where did the wilderness of the mind term come from, by the way?
Well, the wilderness of the mind was actually a term that was brought in through the UN. And if you look at a video on YouTube called UNCED, UNCED, the Elite Plan Well Ahead, there was a man called George Hunt, and he was an environmentalist. And he managed to get into the conferences that went into the Rio conference in '92, which sparked off the whole of sustainable development and got it into global to local government and then into policy. But what happened was he attended this meeting by default because somebody couldn't go. And he was so horrified as to what he heard from Edmund Rothschild Maurice Strong and Stephen Rockefeller and bankers, investment bankers, basically saying the cannon fodder needs something simple to latch onto. In other words, sustainable development, or the Gaia cult, save the planet for the World Bank.
My name is George Hunt. I'm speaking to you from a video studio in Boulder, Colorado. I have attended some of the meetings and caucuses leading to the Unsaid Earth Summit. I am a business consultant and a college teacher in small business management. I own an environment company too, and am very familiar with the environment hypocrisy that the World Order crowd has taken over the environment movement. I am aware of their plans. When I served as an official host at a key environment meeting in Denver, Colorado in 1987, I was surprised to see David Rockefeller, Edmund de Rothschild, Secretary of State Baker, then Secretary of the Treasury, Maurice Strong, Waste Company Chairman and EPA Administrator William Ruckelshaus, UN Secretary General in Geneva McNeil, and various World Bank and IMF officials there. What were the rich elite and bankers doing at an Environment Congress? What is the World Summit meeting, and who is behind it? The Unsaid World Summit, that's UNCED World Summit, is a key event in a series of environment meetings which have occurred since 1972. Maurice Strong, a UN official and an employee of the Rockefeller and Rothschild Trusts and Projects, convened the first Congress in Stockholm, Sweden in 1972. 20 years later, Maurice Strong is the Secretary General and convener of Unsaid. In the 1970s and 1980s, numerous conferences created political action decrees, eventually to lead to the Unsaid Earth Summit. I attended 2 meetings in Colorado in 1987 and 1991. Friends attended others in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Des Moines. Here is a paper from the Des Moines meeting where Maurice Strong was in charge. Representative Gephardt's telephone number appears on the meeting documents. Here are some phrases from the document of the Secretariat for World Order, which were distributed at the Des Moines Unsaid meeting. We are the living sponsors of the great Cecil Rhodes' will of 1877, in which Rhodes devoted his fortune to the extension of British rule throughout the world and colonization by British subjects of the entire continent of Africa, the Holy Land, the valley of the Euphrates, the islands of Cyprus and Candia, the whole of South America, the islands of the Pacific not heretofore possessed by Great Britain, the whole of the Malay archipelago, the seaboard of China and Japan, the ultimate recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire. We stand with Lord Milner's credo. We too are British race patriots, and our patriotism is the speech, the traditions, the principles, the aspirations of the British race. Do you fear to take this stand at the very last moment when this purpose can be realized? Do you not see that failure now is to be pulled down by the billions of Lilliputians of lesser race who care little or nothing for the Anglo-Saxon system? Copies of this document are distributed to you with this videotape. At the Fourth World Congress meeting in 1987, some other bad remarks about common people were made. I'm going to play them for you now. For instance, here is David Lang, a Montreal international investment banker, one of their pack, decreeing that these environment and economic activities of the world order not be shared with the public. He calls us cannon fodder. Listen to this.
I suggest, therefore, that this be solved not through a democratic process. That would take too long and devour far too much of the funds to educate the cannon fodder, unfortunately, which populates the earth. We have to take almost an elitist program that we can see beyond our swollen bellies and look to the future in time frames and in results, which are not easily understood or which can be, with intellectual honesty, be reduced down to some kind of simplistic definition.
In world politics, the names of First World, Second World, Third World, and Fourth World are used to describe blocks of political entities. The First World is the capitalist countries of Europe and North America. They are industrial and are, therefore, the world's biggest polluters. The Second World is the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries. Do you remember Rothschild referring to a Second World Marshall Plan? He was speaking of the Soviet Bloc countries, not a second Marshall Plan. He was speaking of the Soviet Bloc countries and that they will be rescued by First World money. Europe was granted huge sums of money by the Marshall Plan in 1949, and the Second World will receive billions of North American money in this repeat performance. And guess what banking family will act as the main money changers for the Russian ruble, possibly absconding with billions? The Rothschild Group, of course. Rothschild made these remarks back in 1987, 2 years before the Berlin Wall was torn down. He was bragging to us that he knew the Soviet regime would collapse. Here are some April 1992 news articles about the progress of Rothschild's Second World Marshall Plan. They come from the New York Times, and the world order is right on time. Here is a April 15th, 1992 New York Times headline. $44 billion needed to aid ex-Soviets in 1992, IMF says. It's needed for a shift to the free market. Most of the help would finance imports of food and spare parts for 15 republics. My response to that is, sure. Let's talk about the Third World now. The Third World are those countries who have emerged since World War II. Young and easily fooled, the World Bank under Robert S. McNamara played bad tricks on them, spiriting billions of loan dollars back to Swiss bank accounts through fictitious African addresses. They now owe $1.5 trillion to the world banking system with nothing to show for it except poverty and cruel loan collections. Maurice Strong has suggested an ominous scenario at the UNCED meeting, which could break out if his words are to be believed. He says in this article in West magazine that a fight may erupt between the first world polluters and the third world poor. Here is how he describes it. Each year, he explains as background to the telling of his novel's plot, the World Economic Forum convenes in Davos, Switzerland. Over 1,000 CEOs, prime ministers, finance ministers, and leading academics gather in February to attend meetings and set economic agendas for the year ahead. With this as a setting, Maurice Strong then says, what if a small group of these world leaders were to conclude that the principal risk to the earth comes from the actions of the rich countries? And if the world is to survive, those rich countries would have to sign an agreement reducing their impact on the environment. Will they do it? He's really talking about the UNCED meeting. And Strong, driving as I take notes, looks at me. Then his eyes go back to Highway 17 on the way from Alamosa, Colorado to his New Age ranch in Crestone, Colorado. He says, the man who founded the United Nations Environment Program and who wrote parts of the Brundtland Report and who in 1992 will try to get the world's leaders meeting in Brazil to sign just such an agreement savors the questions hanging in the air. Will they do it? Will the rich countries agree to reduce their impact on the environment? The fourth world. No one really talks about the fourth world, do they? That's because we haven't seen the fourth world come about. The fourth world came up in the title of the Congress I attended. It was called the Fourth World Wilderness Congress. Maurice Strong said it was called the Fourth World because it was the fourth one of these environment congresses that Edmund de Rothschild had created. I learned later that the world order refers to the coming one world government as the Fourth World. World controlled by the world order where there is no more first, second, and third world. Just a boundaryless planet which is called the Fourth World Wilderness. Yogis and shamans refer to it as the Fourth World Wilderness, the lostness of the mind. The lostness of the mind refers to the collective consciousness. Persons will be coerced through lies, drugs, fear, and pain to surrender themselves, their egos, to the collective consciousness. The Fourth World will be a return to a society much like the Caesars or Babylon or the Fourth Reich, within the fictionalized societies described in Huxley's Brave New World and Brave New World Revisited and Orwell's classic 1984. We will flourish with only a whimper. The world order wants to create a new society out of the ashes of chaos, a collectivist fourth world complete with a collectivist religion, collectivist finance, and unchecked world national socialism. The world order will offer Gaia, Mother Earth, to the masses as the Big Brother image to worship in the fourth world. Maurice Strong has already set up a 140,000-acre project in Crestone, Colorado to develop this Earth religion system. Projects are funded by the Rockefeller Fund, among other foundations. The Earth Summit will link environment with industry. The lords of the UNCED conference will be the masters of who gets what and when if we don't do something about it quickly. Who leads the environment movement? The convener of the summit, Maurice Strong, identifies Baron Edmund de Rothschild as the creator of the environment movement. Here are his own words describing Rothschild as the positive synthesis of environment on the one hand and growth and development on the other. Listen carefully as Maurice Strong introduces Baron de Rothschild.
So there is no better person. He epitomizes in his own life that positive synthesis between environment, conservation on the one hand and economics on the other. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity of introducing to you Edmund de Rothschild.
Maurice, thank you very much indeed for all that you've said, and I would ask the audience to take with a slight grain of salt all that he has said about me. And I want to start there a little bit of my talk to you on a somewhat different vein. You see, in order to further the ideals of the world wilderness concept, and to prevent the concept and this concept just to remain an ideal, it is of paramount importance to find ways and means of finding and promoting its rationale.
So that, to me, was the key. As Mikhail Gorbachev said in 1996, environmentalism will be the key which unlocks the new world order.
But they all love that. They all bring that new world order up. So global governance, I've heard the term, but I mean, that just refers to that. It's just another name for that, isn't it? Or is it like...
Well, global governance is unstructured in the eyes of the public. Therefore, the globalists, Jack Attali wrote a book called Millennium Winners and Losers in the 90s. And I wouldn't advise anyone to read it. It's really boring because these people are really boring. Yeah. But when you look at some of the quotes, they are very particular as to what they're talking about. They're talking about where are the resources on Earth now? Where are we going to plunder next? How we're going to get those resources, how we're going to take over the country, how we're going to control it.
I've been hearing things that oil is not really a finite resource. Like, you know, it's the second most plentiful resource besides water. Yeah. And then I'm watching Colonel Prouty, the guy that From the 70s. You find his videos, they're great.
The origin of
You see, when they first found petroleum, because they were beginning to make motors and needed on axles of wheels on railroad trains and all that sort of thing, and remember trains started in the beginning of the 19th century, then oil went from just a lubricant to a fuel, and it made it valuable. And Rockefeller happened to be the smartest man in the business at the time, but he made most of his money, or much of it, off the transport of the petroleum as well as selling it. But one thing they realized was, because oil is putting a price on oil is like putting a price on a pail of water. You know, no initial cost. It's in the ground, and in those days they were some of it almost what you'd call surface mining the oil. They didn't go down deep. So in order to get the price up, they hit on the idea that they would have to make it appear to be scarce. That boy, after we take the next few barrels out, we're probably going to have to close as well. You know, that kind of thing. A very fortuitous event. In 1892, there was a convention in Geneva of scientists to determine what organic substances are. Well, the definition of organic is a substance with hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And so it's usually a living substance, a tree. You analyze a dead tree, hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, and grass, and so on, living things. Animals, we are hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. So at this Geneva Convention, Rockefeller took advantage of sending some scientists over who said, oil, petroleum, is hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Therefore, it must be derived from the spoiling, the rotting of formerly living matter. And playing the game properly, when this scientific convention was over, they defined oil as a residue from formerly living matter. Well, that makes it a fossil fuel. I don't know why they decided to use the word fossil, but it says formerly living matter is fossil. Well, of course, today, and another thing we should know is that there has never been a fossil, a real fossil, found below 16,000 feet. And you can't argue at 16,000 as a level line because someplace the ground sinks and so on, but 16 is what the scientists say, 16,000. We mine oil, or we drill for oil at 30,000, 33,000, 28,000 every day of the week. So right there, we rule it out that it isn't fossil fuel. It's called fossil fuel for the minds of the public to feel that it is an asset that is running out, being depleted. We talk about depletion allowance, which is a lot of, and actually, if you know the world's oil supply, you know that it is not going to run out for an awfully long time. It is the second most prevalent liquid on Earth. And we haven't begun to, well, with all that background, you see, the people in charge of the petroleum business, for perfectly reasonable business things, like any other man in the business, wants to keep his price as high as he can get away with. And the way to do is just say, well, there's no more. The last barrel is going to cost $1,000, and then it's all done. And they preach that stuff. What bothers me is that in geology books, it's in there. The geologists say it's a fossil fuel. Somehow they've been bought. I mean, I went to a 4-year federal staff energy seminar run by the government of the United States during the so-called energy crisis. I was the participant that represented the railroad industry. The airline industry was there. Every AA, administrative assistant of senators and congressmen, was there. The CIA was there. The Defense Department was there. The State Department was there. Sometimes sitting right in front of me in the row would be Henry Kissinger with his friend, the head of the Department of Defense. That's too bad, I can't put the names with them. But anyway, people like that, top men in the government, sitting there listening to the Federal Staff Energy Seminar. Well, what this was doing is for 4 years, they were teaching a propaganda line to the leading people in this country, and therefore to the leading people in the world, when you include the Kissinger and Schlesinger, among others. And the object of it was, as Kissinger used in his own terms when it was time for him to speak, to create a world price for oil. In other words, not 30 cents a gallon here and 90 cents a gallon there, but let's get a world price. That's their goal, and they're trying to do that for wheat and everything else. We don't realize what the controls are, whether it's oil or some of these other things. Almost everything today is being categorized at the highest price they can possibly make it go. And so calling petroleum a fossil fuel is the basis for this system with respect to petroleum. And I don't know if the name Arthur Kantrowitz rings any bell. Arthur Kantrowitz is the head of the Kantrowitz Labs set up by the AFCO company near Boston, Scientific Laboratories, and a great man in the scientific world. And Kantrowitz and I were sitting at a table at this seminar once, and the table happened to be all young college grad, PhD geologists. And so just to get a conversation started, I turned to Kantrowitz and I said, Arthur, what do you think about this foolishness of these speakers talking about fossil fuel? And it was kind of put up. He started laughing. He said, that gets me. He says, I don't have a geology degree, but he had 1,000 other degrees. And he said, I don't understand. He said, you'd think that these heads, these other fellows at the table, we did it on purpose. Start listening, And he said, are you gentlemen? He says, you're here at the meeting. Are you gentlemen by any chance geologists? And one fellow, yes, I am. The other, he said, well, why don't you tell me? He said, why is oil? He went on like that. We brought the house down because nobody could argue with Kantrowitz. He like Einstein. People aren't going to, and he told him right there, he said, just drop it. But it's in all the books and in all the papers. But it started from that strange meeting in 1892.
When they started saying oil was scarce, and he was around when they weren't saying that, and that's when they came up with fossil fuel and the Sinclair dinosaur. to make you think that the fuel's from dinosaurs because it's so rare.
That's right. It's a fossil fuel. It's actually newsflash, news just in. It's not, because
it's just carbon.
Russians have been finding abiotic oil because Russia's got loads of oil.
Yeah,
and they found out that abiotic oil was really quite much nearer the surface than they thought. That how can this happen? Because it's a naturally occurring substance within the earth. It's not fossils.
That's right. And so then it dawned on me because I thought that was a little far-fetched, but then I remember De Beers, but mostly Sir Cecil Rhodes, but the thing where they pretend diamonds are scarce and they're not, that we've all heard that story. Every good liberal has heard the story of how diamonds are not actually rare, but the De Beers company hoarded them. They're not the ones in charge of that now, but at the time, they drove the price up by hoarding it. And I go, okay, well, we're talking about Rockefeller. All these guys are, energy is also national defense. So automatically you get to do all kinds of fuckery automatically just because of that. And of course, if I run it, I'm going to make it scarce on purpose. Why would I not do that? That's a very, right now, especially, and I don't think it's normal. I don't think it's like, I remember people being stupid and I remember being stupid, but I don't remember this level of not remembering anything. So here's something on Jimmy Dore show with I sidekick on that I still can't get over. The clips of General Petraeus sitting down with the ISIS Al-Qaeda leader who they installed in Syria, who's supposedly better than Assad. No one from Syria would say that. Only the demented fucking. Anyway, Petraeus is sitting down with the guy who's standing behind Daniel Pearl in all likelihood in that video. Okay, and he's like, "How are you holding it?" He's talking to him like they're on, like he's it's Oprah or something.
So this next one is about you personally. How are you holding up under all this pressure? Are you getting time to do some thinking? Are you getting enough sleep at night? Again, I've been there, and it is so very, very hard. And you're many fans, and I am one of them. We do have worries.
Guantanamo's still open. We still have Guantanamo. We get blown off in war over there, and you sit here and watch the general sit down with the guy. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I explain it to people, and they'll go, "Oh, a little bit." Well, a couple people will really be like, "That is the craziest shit," but most people just kind of like, I don't know, like they're trained to blank out. They'll say, "No, Israel's not working out." And by the way, I'm prejudiced against Arabs. I want to make it clear that I'm a good person who's prejudiced naturally against Muslims, like all good people. I would never listen to them about what's going on. Jews are telling me there's $2 trillion worth of natural gas under there.
That's
$2 trillion.
And the gas, yeah.
And Syria had to go, decided to go because our pipeline, and we blew up that pipeline to Germany. America blew that up, and then said Russia blew up their own pipeline. I remember it was insane. By the way, the largest amount of greenhouse gases in human history, recorded human history, ever man-made was the blowing up the what's the pipeline called? I keep mixing it up with the one over
Nord Stream.
Nord Stream 2. Blowing up Nord Stream 2, that natural gas going in the air was the worst catastrophe. If you believe in climate change, that's the worst catastrophe.
You see, they don't. They want you to believe in it so that they can take your stuff and you will be basically an unsecured tenant on the land.
I don't think it's by chance.
I think it comes down to this individual responsibility thing again, because I think it comes down to really connecting with your conscience and looking at where things really are and where you are. Because the idea, I think, for me, of what's happened, especially in the UK, is people became more dumbed down after the COVID agenda. And that was a psychological assault, fair enough. But to me, I found it extraordinarily empowering because I thought, they're off. This is war.
Dialectic, they call it.
The dialectic.
That's how it's gain of function research as government is how I look at it. And it's
perfect.
It's like, let's put these things together, and then whichever the strong, and we'll make the pain of separation more than the pain of having to come together and do what I want.
Yes.
Yeah. When I was in England in 2011, I did the Real Deal Comedy Jam. It was like an all-black comedy tour.
Mm-hmm.
Then the guys that ran it, I really fucking love them guys. But anyway, I remember watching British TV, and I'm watching the news, and they're talking about how British people are really good at queuing. They're like, well, we in England, we all know how to queue. I didn't know what the hell that meant.
Britain's inherent love of queuing, a long-standing tradition. Throughout history, we have mostly formed an orderly queue, whether it's for Wimbledon or a bargain.
But could our patience for waiting around be waning? Well, it turns out that clever academics have in fact been studying the art of queuing. Yes, there is such a thing. And we haven't just been idly standing around like this in an orderly fashion for generations for no reason. There is, in fact, a method to all of this. And it turns out that 6 is the magic number.
Yes, researchers found that on average we'll wait for 6 minutes or less in a queue before giving up in frustration. Well, you'll never get that time back. And people are unlikely to join a queue that has more than, you guessed it, 6 people in it. And keeping with the theme, 6 inches in between queuers is the minimum amount of personal space needed to avoid stress.
And standing in line, it turned out, and I was like, it's such a telling thing to me. You go to the bank and they got that rope thing, and no one's in line, but you walk through it anyway. Like
that's right. I know. And you get a real bollocking for kind of jumping it or not realizing that there's a queue.
Am I allowed? This rope is here for a reason.
It almost gets into, well, I pay my taxes, why don't you? Sort of argument straight away. And I think that was particularly telling in COVID, because I remember going to the local supermarket and there was this ridiculous queue. And they were all standing about 3 meters apart. And it really sorted the wheat from the chaff, because people that I thought will never believe this were going, hey, don't get too close. Don't get too close now. Right. And I took my car in for an MOT during the COVID thing. And this fella, I thought, oh, he won't be falling for this, because he'd painted this old army truck and he was traveling around in it. I thought, he knows what's going on, you know. So I took my car in and he goes, oh, don't come into the garage. Step out of the vehicle, please. Step out of the vehicle. Open the windows. Let's get some air in before we get near the vehicle. I thought, I couldn't believe it, you know. And
I remember from the AIDS times. Remember when AIDS came out and they were like, you can get every stupid story how you can catch AIDS.
Oh, yeah,
yeah. It reminded me of that. And Fauci was there at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's very similar, but they tried it in 2009 with the bird flu and it hadn't worked and they got sued, didn't they? But what was interesting, there's a paper called A Safer Future, which came out in 2007. I did a show on it years before COVID. And it was how countries would be brought into line through the consensus. In other words, that all other countries under the banner of global governance, under the banner of Agenda 2030, would actually ostracize and punish any country which didn't go along with the UN WHO agenda. The World Health Organization were talking about pandemics as a driver of change in 2007, and they were saying this is going to happen. So when it did happen, it was of no surprise to me at all on the 11th of March 2020, I think it was, when they declared war. So you get the two, it's like in Britain, you get the so-called far right and the far left, and they meet in the middle of Whitehall. And it's like a tradition that's been going on 10 years. So Tommy Robinson will lead the so-called far right, who are basically the Zionist lobby who are running the government.
I love that. Either way, Zionists run the...
And then, of course, they're running the pro-Palestine thing as well. I knew that years ago.
Well, I like in England now, you're not allowed to, because we're covering stories of all the people that getting arrested for tweets in the UK.
Oh, it's horrendous, Kurt. It's really horrendous. Yeah.
Well, then I saw a story where a guy gets arrested for tweeting F Hamas. I'm like, oh, you're not allowed to trash either side. You have to just shut up. That's like the law. We covered that Keir Starmer announcing, I can't remember the conference he's at, but the conference, long story short, was to combat populism, okay?
In his tribute to His Majesty the King, it is so heartening to see him in his rightful place delivering the gracious speech. We must heed the words of President Biden to lower the temperature of our democracy, work across our disagreements, and find each other's common decency. Mr. Speaker, this government has been elected to deliver nothing less than national renewal, to stop the chaos of the past 14 years, turn the page on an era of politics as noisy performance, and return it to public service, and start the work of rebuilding our country. A determined rebuilding, a patient rebuilding, a calm rebuilding, a rejection in this complicated and volatile world of those who can only offer the easy answer, the snake oil charm of populism. Mr. Speaker, as the last 14 years has shown, that road is a dead end for this country. It does nothing to fix our foundations, and the British people have rejected it, as they have throughout our history. What people really want is change. And change is what this government of service will deliver.
AKA the mysterious force, I bet.
The rise of populism, as if it's a bad thing. That just means that's what people want,
It sounds like a video on the mysterious force. It sounds like when people say about Christ, oh, it's Caesar's Messiah. I don't believe in any of that Caesar's Messiah shit. No. I think that mysterious force thing, it's populism. What scares elites the most? All the people putting aside their petty shit because they realize they're getting screwed by these people on top.
Yes.
And that could spread like wildfire. And that could account for the spread of Christ early on. I'll bet you that could, and that could account for trying to appropriate
the original Christians were very radical in their belief system. And it was a belief system which took a lot of inner resolve. So also the thing is now that the inner resolve is what's important.
Right.
The force they fear is a real thing. Because if you have inner resolve and you have knowledge, then you have power.
Yeah, no, it's the best. You don't have to kill nobody. You literally...
Yeah, and it's a natural occurring power. It's not a power over other people. It's a power within you.
Because the thing falls apart if you're not all doing
parasites don't want, because parasites don't like people with integrity.
No, it's a problem. It's a problem to the thing I'm trying to build here. And why do you go to good schools and why do you have good breeding? To learn how to turn a blind eye. Like in The Madness of King George. You ever see that movie? Where the guy who was nice to him gets sacked at the end, and then the dickhead colonel goes, "You were kind to His Majesty. In the future, a blind eye will serve you better."
You were kind to His Majesty during his illness, Greville. To be kind does not commend you to kings. A blind eye will serve you better. You will travel further.
It really is like a, parts of it are comical, but that's when you see like there's something where somebody thinks because they got a lot of money and they've been scioned in to the royal bloodline or whatever the fuck they try to do, they start to believe they're a different race than you. And that's what I was like trying to find out.
Well, I brought up into it, Kurt. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it starts at Oxford University or, or 5 years old, that they are being pushed into a situation where they're taught that they're the creme de la creme and that they will be the future leaders.
The power structure lies down the pyramid at you, but the saving grace is, like every other thing, people are shitty and ambitious and lying their way up the pyramid. So, no, the only principle is whatever helps you suck it up to power to get ahead, whatever you have to do. And it's mind-blowing to watch it. So I could see how being in a goddamn nightmare war zone and there's one guy keeping up appearances, how comforting that might feel to me, if I was in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's a peculiar thing about the British, which is very isolationist. And I've known a lot of these aristocrats. They're living in falling down houses. They might be property rich, but they're definitely cash poor. And they're still talking about Britain the same way that people did in the 17th and 18th century. And you try and bring them up to date and they really won't have it.
Yeah, well, that De Vere guy, you brought up De Vere, maybe wrote those Shakespeare plays. So the De Vere family are Anjou or some shit, and they call themselves dragon people and all. So that guy, I don't know if you read Tracy Twyman's research. I've been on a real kick reading all her shit. But
I looked at that a while ago, but I'm not overly familiar.
It's unreal what she did. She got. I explained in the last one, but anyway, she objectively, with no preconceived notions, was like, okay, I'm just going to look into this stuff, and she started going on a Ouija board. And I can't remember the part of France she was in, where they were trying to contact a guy named Jean Cocteau, who was some Templar.
Well, Jean Cocteau was a French playwright, wasn't he? And
yeah, and so he could only, it was like at Bash Cipher they were being communicated with. Then he goes, you got to talk to Cain. So then they're talking to Bible Cain, supposedly. Then they start getting dreams to build a better Ouija board, which they did do.
Well, it was kind of like back, the Nine. There was a group called the Nine.
Right.
There were a group of elite, rich, people in the United States that wanted to do a seance to find out something about the future. And you decided you want to do something similar with a secret society of your own, right?
Well, the secret society pre-existed the Ouija board seances, and it was mainly just the organization that was publishing the magazine we were doing at the time, Dagobert's Revenge. And we were doing research into the esoteric secrets of the Holy Grail and the secret societies associated with that, related to the Knights Templar and things like that.
So you're using the Ouija board as a tool for research?
Yes, that was how the whole thing started. We started talking to Jean Cocteau, who was a an artist who may have been involved in a secret society related to the Grail. So we started talking to him literally just one night, because he had been doing that table rapping that you talked about. When he was alive, this artist from the early 20th century, when he was alive, he used to do table rapping. So we thought, well, maybe we'll get some insight into our research by talking to him. And like I said before, he had some stuff to say, but he kind of indicated that we were barking up the wrong tree and we should really talk to someone else. And that's when he referred us to Cain, or the Black Sun, as he called him. And we're literally talking about Cain from the Bible. And that's when I started getting some really interesting results. And actually, the first time we contacted Cain was, I think, Halloween of 2001. Mm-hmm. So then, we talked to Cain for a long time. I mean, over the next couple of years, we had several sessions, and I had transcripts and videos of that. And then eventually Cain told us that we needed to talk to Baphomet about some of the things that we were asking, which, is the demon that the Knights Templar back in the crusading times used to worship in secret ceremonies. And the whole thing came out when they were persecuted for blasphemy and heresy by the papacy a little bit later. I know that Hammer Purgstall, when he wrote about the Templars, that Orientalist, he said that he thought that that's exactly what they were doing too, and that's how they were controlling their members. The artifacts that he discovered, he didn't belabor this point because child abuse was not really a big deal back then. Nobody really talked about the rights of children, so that the fact that children were being harmed potentially in rituals was not like the big headline for him, but he was just writing about sodomy rights and then also showing the pictures that seem to depict that. And they involve creatures that, according to the pictures, are either like little elf men or they are children. And it could be either, really. But we know that the Templars did, especially like I think in the later years, induct very young members. So someone as young as 10, I know, in England was inducted, and they would have been also invited to spit on the cross and, kiss another guy's butt and all this stuff, which I don't think that it specifies in the document you have that there's actual
no. There's no reference to any sodomy or analingus or anything like that. Besides just Mersworth saying it existed in the past, and it's sort of similar to the rubbing and kissing the idol. Yeah,
but another document that came out of the Vatican does seem to have confirmed that much. So that I don't feel like maybe they didn't bother to belabor that point in this document, but I think we know that did happen, and so, but we don't know if it went as far as some of the other things that other Gnostic sects, for instance, were, I guess Christian Gnostic sects in later years were accused of, but almost all of them. We mentioned the Waldensians, and there were several of these other groups that were accused of the same set of rituals, very similar, having to do with an idol, sometimes with the head of a cat, or it's like a man, it turns into a man, and then it turns into a cat, and then you're doing these rituals that involve group sex, sodomy, and then usually a child is killed, blood is drained. A lot of times, this is what they said about Waldensians, and these are accusers of them, not the Waldensians themselves, but this is what they were accused of: is burning the victim, the baby victim, so that it would turn into ashes, and then they would mix the ashes with blood and make a paste and anoint the idol with it. The same exact things that then European witches would be accused of later. So we don't know that the Templars really did that kind of hardcore stuff. But there was definitely homoerotic overtones to this induction rite. And then their statutes...
Their symbol is homoerotic.
And then there's just the proclamation that was supposedly made. This is, again, according to the Chinon parchment from the Vatican, released by the Vatican, from the confessions they made to the Pope when they were put on their second trial by the Church itself, not just the King of France, that they said it's bad to have sex with women, it's bad to lust after women, and it's so much better that if you have to do that kind of stuff, you should do it with a man.
Well, it was you can't refuse the advancements of a brother, right?
Yeah. It was, again, not that it's good, but you got to let it out somehow, and so do it this way instead. So anyway, we got all sorts of information from Cain, not only about the Grail research we were doing, but all sorts of stuff about the Bible. He would give us different versions of Bible stories. He told us about the fall of Atlantis, and he told us about the secrets of chess and the origins of that. And then eventually he told us that, actually we were asking, you were mentioning earlier how some people use the Ouija board to try to get money. Well, at the time, my husband and I, the previous husband I used to have, his name was Brian, we were having money problems, And so one time we just decided to ask Cain if he could help us figure it out, because it almost seemed like we were cursed. We just couldn't seem to get ahead at all. Mm-hmm. And I just figured, since Cain is a discarnate spirit, I'll talk to him about it. And sure enough, he says, actually, yes, you're cursed. You're cursed by Baphomet. And it turned out he said that Baphomet was punishing us because I said I was going to there was a friend of mine who was trying to publish a book. I had promised the guy that I would help him, and then I had forgotten about it. So we were told that Baphomet was punishing us because we had failed to do this thing for our friend, and supposedly Baphomet had some interest in this book that I was supposed to help publish. And so then, I don't know, then actually it seemed like Baphomet had even more to say and was even more helpful to us than Cain. So we talked to him pretty much from that point onward, and some of the interesting things that came out of that, well, he dictated a new Ouija board design to my husband, Brian, which we're going to be using tonight. I've been using it ever since. It's the most unique Ouija board I think you'll ever find. And it's really kind of made in the likeness of a Masonic tracing board, although we didn't realize that at the time. But it very much resembles like the opening to a Masonic lodge. So in a way, I think it's more of a portal even than the regular Ouija boards that people buy. It actually has a circle in the middle and then these two pillars on either side sort of marking the entrance to the other world. And then the board itself, I did the same thing because it is the same thing. It is a representation, as I said, of a Masonic lodge and the portal that's within a Masonic lodge to the other side. Exactly. So, and I really only realized this recently because we had a seance with Cain maybe 2 months ago. My husband and I, Harath, who's coming in tonight. And we noticed during that seance that he was visiting the four corners of the board repeatedly, and then he kept going around in a circle on the letters. Just because we have on my Ouija board, we have the letters arranged in a circle, right? And so he kept doing the circle and then the four corners. And I realized after a while, it was like he was doing an opening to a ritual right there. And I asked him, are you trying to open a portal to the other world? Because he is in the underworld and everyone who's in the underworld really wants to be out. And so I said, are you trying to get out and come here? And he said, yes. And then he got really, I would say, uncooperative for a while. He wouldn't answer our questions because he was mad that we had interrupted what he was trying to do. Every year on Halloween, we would always get our best results. I don't know what it was about Halloween, but we asked him at one point, we actually said, is there something special about Halloween or the date? We asked, does it have to do with the fact that it's the number 31 and it's the reversal of 13? Because he had emphasized the number 13 before. And yeah, he just said, yes, the number 13 is holy and this day is holy. Now, holy to who? I don't know. Is it holy to God? I'm not sure, but to Baphomet, it was holy. And we, let's see, he dictated some rituals for us to do. He really taught us magic. I was, of course, a student of the occult. I read a lot of books about the occult, but I never started doing any rituals or trying to make anything happen until Baphomet told us specifically what to do, and we acted out those rituals. And, from further research, it turned out that everything he told us to do was common practice in ritual magic. So, yeah, it's really, to me, it was almost like a sholomance, which I've used that term when talking to you before. I know a sholomance is what is mentioned in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Supposedly, Dracula was a part of this school that was taught directly by the devil. So every year there would be these students, 13 of them, that would come and to learn magic directly from the devil, but only one of them would graduate every year. And they supposedly, they call it riding the dragon when you graduate from sholomance. So I felt like this was a sholomance in that we were learning magic directly from Baphomet, who, at least in the popular consciousness now is very much synonymous with the devil, because the tarot card with the picture of the devil on it was basically based on Eliphas Levi's depiction of Baphomet. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It's, you've got a hermaphroditic human body with male and female organs, and then there's a goat head on top of it. So if you've seen that, that's Baphomet.
Did you ever think it was dangerous to even come close to having the communication with Baphomet? Did you feel like you were getting near danger? Because it seems that you open yourself up to all kinds of spirits, not just dead ones or ones that are just coming through, but other ones like Baphomet or even Cain, which are important names in the scheme.
Well, I think after having done it for several years, I started to get nervous about it. I stopped doing it for a few years, and mainly it was because I really took it very deep. We had this relationship with these spirits. Excuse me. They were doing, like I said, they were telling us what to do. We were doing projects for them. The order, the secret society that I was a part of, we basically made Baphomet the head of that. And he would tell us what to do all the time. And so, I found myself so busy with projects that Baphomet had told me to do. I just kind of got sick of that. And I felt used. And so I did discontinue my relationship for a while. But really, and eventually I decided to go back and just, because it was such a good source of information. So every now and then I still do seances, but I don't take orders from these spirits anymore. And it's just a source of information. But as far as the danger is concerned, honestly, that's the worst that's ever happened. And it's really my fault. I let myself get sucked in. I let myself become a servant. But, that's not the way it always has to be. And that's not the way it's been for years. So
as she's describing this dryly, it's like a horror movie. Like, oh my God, did you do that? Yeah, she did it.
Yeah, the thing with that, all that is that the things that come through Ouija boards pretty much always lie about who they are.
Oh no, this is what's wild, dude. She's completely, And so, like, some of the stuff, she's completely objective about it. But the thing that's crazy is she's being objective about it while doing things. So that at one point they set up a secret society where people are sending them samples of their blood, like signing in blood on things because Baphomet told them to do that. It was all curiosity. Later she goes, I'm not doing this anymore. And she explains it. She goes, well, you're like, well, I'm learning things or whatever, but they're liars. The things that she got from this are fascinating, okay? Of course, a lot of them are lies. It's like a Nigerian prince scam. I just look at that as the internet before the internet. You don't know who the fuck you're talking to.
Yeah.
You get catfished. However, because she's smart, the things that she picked up on are like things I've never heard before, especially how the different entities would communicate. Because she had made this new Ouija board that was like a circle instead of the traditional way because it was easier to get. That's how they told her to design it. It reminded me of the AI designing a better program for you or something. And one of them, the one would communicate only from side to side motion, and there's one that would go in circles. At one point, she said she realized, I don't know if it was Cain. Oh, so supposedly, there's whoever's saying they're Cain was describing Atlantis, where he was like a king or something. And it was, how do you describe it? It sounded like Lord of the Rings, what he was describing. And not only that, he was undead, and undeath was a kind of coma. Like he wasn't, basically he told me that God kept him alive with a little bit of gum, which is an old Sumerian thing for blood or something.
First kings or most important kings, he thinks is Cain. So the figure that's identified as Cain in the Bible is actually matching up with this figure that you can find in the kings lists of these ancient civilizations, and where he's described as Khan or Kin. And Waddell went to a great deal of trouble to try to connect at least the first few of these kings to the biblical patriarchs, and also to all the gods or demigods of all these ancient cultures. He came up with his own chronology where he sort of rewrites history in a way that he thinks makes sense. But what I found was intriguing. I didn't necessarily believe everything Waddell was saying, but I think he's kind of going down the right path here. And the figure of Cain, it really struck me as important. And if I could find out more about him, he might actually be the origin of this Grail bloodline. Because I could tell from researching the clues of that the Priory of Zion had left, and also the Grail stories themselves, the Grail romances, where they do talk about a Grail bloodline again. I could tell that the whole theory of this being started with Jesus and Mary Magdalene, that just wasn't it. That they may be involved, it's possible, they may be part of the bloodline. But I really felt like the myths surrounding the Merovingians, for instance, that pointed to something else. It was really similar to these more ancient stories about the origins of human kings, where they said that the human kings came from gods or angels breeding with humans. But it accidentally, what Atbash cipher really is. I had read that word, but I didn't know what it was. Well, it turns out, okay. Cain, in my dealings with Cain, before he even referred us to Baphomet, he started doing this thing where he would visit every single letter on the board by going from A to Z and then B to Y, and he would go from N to N like that until he worked his way to the middle. So inverting the alphabet, really. And we thought there was some sort of meaning to this. We threw all sorts of theories at him to try to tease out the meaning of it, and we just thought it was a mystical idea that he was teaching us about transcendentalism and transcending duality, and I don't know. It was some sort of alchemical secret, we thought. And we even took my husband, who became my husband, Brian, on inspiration one night, he redesigned our whole Ouija board. And, originally we had a Parker Brothers board. And one night, I wake up in the middle of the night to find him on the computer, and he's designing a new Ouija board. And it had all sorts of new symbols on it, interesting things. All of it derived from the conversations we had with Cain and Baphomet. And when he came to the alphabet, he actually put it in a wheel in a circle and arranged it so that it was just like this alphabet inversion that I just described. So Z was on the opposite side of the wheel to A. And it turns out this arrangement of the alphabet is the Atbash cipher. And I only found that out like a year after he had designed the Ouija board. So Cain and Baphomet were both giving us the Atbash cipher, and we didn't know it. And that is how you turn the word Baphomet into Sophia, which means divine wisdom.
Yeah.
And other interesting things connected to Baphomet and Sophia. Okay, one of the things we asked Baphomet is, are you a head, or we asked what is Baphomet? He said head, and so we said, okay, so you really are this skull that was worshipped by the Templars. He says yes. Which skull? John. And that's what he said. John. And so it's the skull of John the Baptist, which is one of the theories that's been around, that the Templars actually had John the Baptist's head, and they used it as a ritual device to contact Baphomet. And then so we ask, well, where is the head now? And he said, Istanbul. And again, of course, we didn't know it at the time. Years later, I researched the thing, and it turns out that there is a skull of John that's on display even now in the, how do you pronounce this? Mispronounce it, but it's the Church of the Sophia, the Divine Wisdom Church that's in Istanbul.
the Hagia Sophia.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to pronounce the H, and I can't remember how exactly you're supposed to say it. Anyway, so this church is amazing. Even now, it's beautiful, but it's apparently been rebuilt. The first version of it got sacked amazingly by Christian crusaders.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's also the risk with this kind of stuff that maybe it could have indeed been a genuine spirit, but who's to say that spirits don't know how to pull your leg as well? To sort of say, let's wind these people up, let's give them something. Did you have any consideration maybe that could have been afoot, or any sort of prankster entities sort of trying to mess around with you guys?
Well, I get that question a lot, and basically I just think, I'm interviewing someone. Same way I've done lots of radio interviews. I've been on one side and the other on the radio. I've interviewed other people too as the host of shows, and you don't know. You can't see their facial expressions, and most of the time you just don't have the time to follow up on everything they're saying. You're just getting information from their perspective, and so this is the way I see it. It's journalistic research in a way, and you're talking to someone, getting the information they have to share, and then of course it's your job afterwards to try to analyze it and verify what you can, and you don't take everything at face value. And certainly, what we call demonic spirits, and they did reveal themselves to be, anti-Christian for sure. You would think that, you don't want to necessarily take what they say at face value for sure, which I didn't. And I did catch him I caught him lying several times and being wrong several times. I mean, both Cain and Baphomet. But at the same time, it seems to me at least as valuable, in fact, way more valuable than so many of the other interviews I've done with humans. That seemed so interesting at the time, and yet when you follow it up, maybe not all of it is true. Everyone has their own perspective, for one thing. Everyone lies. Everyone tries to present things in the best possible light for themselves. Everyone has an agenda, so that's what it is. It's just an interview with a spirit. Of course, I can't see them, and you can't see them, just because of the nature of the type of communication. But other than that, you have all the same indications of who it is and what level of truth they're giving as any other person you would talk to.
Yeah. One point I'd like to address is the Black Sun, because I know there is an order of the Black Sun that's out there now, and a cult group. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Is the Black Sun that you were being talked to about via the Ouija board, is that got any association with the Order of the Black Sun that's out around today?
These spirits are inspirations for these occult groups. In other words, I think that if you create an occult order and you put, say, the Black Sun as your mascot, chances are you can make a connection, or you already have, and that's what inspired you to do that. So, and I think the same with Baphomet. Like, you can tell which occult groups, which orders are connected to him and have him as their outer head. You can just see the symbolism of him throughout all of the things that they do, and you can say, hey, there's another Baphometic order. And so, yeah, that's all I know for sure. Now, the Black Sun that Cain was talking about, he told us a little bit about it and why he would be identified with that symbol. He said that he was in the center of the earth. We asked him, and he said yes. And then he sort of described the situation he was in. He said that he was locked inside of a prism, Prism, that was also a prison, Prison, was in jail, he said. That he had been put there by God. He said that it had happened after the flood, which he said he was responsible for, that he had caused the flood. The deluge of the Bible, and that he had caused it. Basically, he told this long story about the fall of Eden, as he called it, which he said was the same as the fall of Atlantis. That there was this kingdom or empire in the past that Eden was this seat of, like the throne of Adam, as he described it, was the what do you call it? The place where the rulership of this whole kingdom, and in fact empire, as he described it, was centered at. And so he was the rightful heir to the throne of Adam. And he said also that the throne of Adam was associated with this thing called the Ark, or the one box of things. He said it contained this transcendental power, and he identified it as being the same as the Grail stone and the Philosopher's Stone, that inside of the Ark there was this transcendental power. That's what was sort of the relic, or the I guess the foundation stone of this kingdom, Eden, and having control over this Ark is what would give someone sort of worldly power. You would be the rightful king of the world if you had control over the Ark and the throne of Adam, he said. And so he was going to be the heir to that. But there was a rebellion in these colony countries, as he called them. He said that there were these tributary nations that were part of this empire of Eden, or Atlantis, and they were ruled over by people who were actually his descendants. I don't know if they're people even, beings that were his descendants. And he said there was a rebellion. They were trying to get the throne of Adam and the ark. And he was so angry about that. Well, they ended up having a war. He said it was a war fought by swords and axes. And in the end, he got so disgusted with the whole situation that he did some sort of magic ritual, essentially, or an alchemical process that created a big destruction on Earth. This caused the flood. He said this is what caused Eden to collapse beneath the waves. The majority of Eden, he said, collapsed. And then, of course, there was a part of it that didn't, but that contained, I think, this ark, this treasure. So that got preserved somewhere, but the rest of Eden collapsed. And as part of the same process of the fall of Eden, or the fall of Atlantis, the Cainites, Cain and his descendants, and also his cohorts, the people who were fighting the war on his behalf, all of these characters were cast down into the abyss, into this realm in the underworld that he said he was still speaking from. So he said that down in the abyss where he's at now, he's in this prison that's also a prism, and that there's some sort of energy or light radiating through that causes this effect that's called the black sun. There's some sort of energy basically coming from his prison, the place that he's at, and it radiates throughout the whole underworld, and that this is like the source of their illumination. This is how they are able to navigate in the underworld, where it's otherwise completely dark, foggy, and impenetrable. And then he said that he's not really alive. He's kind of asleep and undead, I guess, like a vampire. And you could tell that, too, from the way he was talking to us. He would sort of fade in and out of consciousness in a way. And sometimes his sentences would trail off into nonsense, and we would have to sort of goad him to get him to talk sense again. And he also actually, the first thing he said when we first talked to him is he complained. He's asked, "Why are you bidding on me?" So he was almost like bothered that we were disturbing his rest, I guess. But anyway, so you could think of the place where he's at as it's not only the place where the sun resides, the black sun. I mean, he is the source of the black sun, but it's also it's a prison and it's a coffin in a way. It was just an idea I had, so I asked Cain, and sure enough, he says that yes, there's a vast temple underneath Rennes-le-Chateau. These 5 peaks are like the 5, maybe pyramids or ziggurats that the whole form the whole complex. He says underneath it, there's a gigantic necropolis of important personages going all the way back to Cain himself and some of the other characters in those stories in the Bible. So that may very well be the physical location he was speaking to us from, he said he's in the center of the earth. Maybe there's an entrance from one of those mountains that actually goes all the way down there. And when we asked him who had built this thing, he said Dagon, Dagon, which was a fish god worshipped by the Philistines. It's mentioned in the Bible. And to me, that corresponds basically with the idea of the Kinotaur, because we talked about the sea creature that spawned the Merovingians, supposedly. Well, kin, Latinized, would indicate the number 5. So you can think of it as like a 5-horned creature. And maybe that is somehow reflected by the fact that there's these 5 peaks and this, what may be an actual temple complex built supposedly by Dagon. So yeah, Dagon, I presume, is some kind of ancient creature or personage. And I still haven't, decided whether these beings, when they were physically present on Earth, were they human or did they resemble humans? Were they giants like the Bible says? I don't know. But if something is able to build a temple complex that looks, like a set of 5 mountains, I would say whoever built that, has pretty fantastic powers. So, whether it's a magician with the ability to mold matter in some sort of fantastic way, I suppose that's possible. Or maybe that creature is just so big that they can move things around like that. And so even recently, we've been getting messages about the end of days. In fact, I did some of this stuff live on international or national radio on the Clyde Lewis show on Halloween. And talked about,
Wow.
Talked about this idea that there are poles holding up the heavens, which is basically an archetype that you find in every ancient culture. That there are poles that hold up the worlds, and a mountain is often the symbol of the pole. So, the mountain's peak reaches high up into heaven, and the mountain itself is holding up the heavens, separating it from Earth, which is necessary. Life could not continue if the heavens were not being separated from Earth constantly. And also it says that usually the way these myths go is that the underworld is accessed by caves that are inside of this mountain. So it's this axis that's running through heaven, earth, and hell. And the mountain is holding up the heavens, or holding that burden. It's like Atlas holding up the heavens. And if something were to happen to that mountain or that pole, theoretically, then the worlds would collide together and chaos would ensue. Existence as we know it would not continue. It would be something else. And the way I view it, it's like literal chaos, like the atoms splitting apart and the time and space as we know it ending. Well, that's kind of what Baphomet, in fact, has indicated. And that we also talked to Cain about this too. So the idea is there's these beings trapped in the underworld that have always wanted to come out. They've been trapped there since this event happened that Cain described to us with the Garden of Eden, since the War of Rebellion, basically. He and all these beings that were loyal to him got trapped in the abyss. And it's like literally jail. And they do deal with us, but they're dealing with us from the underworld. But they really wish that they could be alive. And so that's why they're always trying to possess people, for instance. So that's why they want you to do magic rituals, to allow them into your body so that they can experience life again through you as the vessel. And they really want this pole to be collapsed because that will let them out. And, yes, there will be chaos. But actually what Cain has described recently is this idea. Okay, I talked about the Ark and how the Ark, the one box of things, gives you this power, this transcendental power over the whole, existence, I think. So it seems to me that what he's been describing, how things will play at the end of days, really does kind of match up with what you see in Revelation, because Revelation talks about, okay, Cain had said that he's inside of a box, or he describes a box, this Ark box. When they get let out of their prison, I think that they think they're somehow going to be able to take charge of the Ark. And, they'll be the pilots of the Ark. In other words, they'll be able to control existence or reality. They'll be in the seat of God, basically. And I think that that's what the demons are trying to do. In the book of Revelation, it talks about the New Jerusalem being this cubic city that comes down from heaven and lands on earth and creates a new heaven on earth. And and then what happens is basically all the righteous people are let inside of the cube. And they're the few. The majority of people are not considered worthy to be inside there. And so the chosen few go in. They're given fruit from the tree of life. They're given the water of life from the rivers of life. And they get to live forever. And then everyone else is trapped on the outside of the cube, and they get consumed by the lake of fire. They basically are like, thrown into this chaos that I'm talking about. That's what I imagine is like everything around the cube falls apart into nothingness, really. And so, we all like to think that if we're good enough, that God will reward us by letting us inside the cube. And I think that the demons are ambitious enough that they think they can force their way in and take over that way. So, interestingly enough, after I wrote the book, Clock Shavings, and had these recent sessions with Cain and Baphomet where they were telling me this kind of story, I watched Noah, how do you pronounce his name?
Aronofsky. Yeah.
Yeah, who, you look at all of his films and they're full of Kabbalism and mystical secrets. I mean, this guy is way into Jewish mysticism, obviously. And
a lot of Gnosticism as well.
Yes. And so there's this really interesting part, I think, where in that story, the Ark is built as this stationary thing that then gets swept up by the waves. And there's even the scene where Noah is explaining to his family how, all of creation is inside of this box right now, and everything outside is chaos. It's been dissolved into nothingness. But as it turns out, one of the bad guys, one of the descendants of Cain, has snuck on board the Ark, and he just stays there waiting the whole time until Noah's son has some conflict issues, personality conflicts with his father. And at that point, this descendant of Cain, Tubal-Cain, he makes friends with Noah's son and convinces him, you really have to kill your father in order to have what you want. His father was in the movie. It's weird. It's like Noah's telling everyone that they have to just, instead of procreating and building a new earth, that they all have to just die. So the son is rebelling against that idea and teams up with Tubal-Cain to kill his own father. And so he helps Tubal-Cain obtain a weapon, and the Tubal-Cain, he basically kind of ushers his father into the harm's way, where he's besieged all of a sudden by Tubal-Cain. Noah didn't even know this guy was on board the Ark, and all of a sudden he comes at him with a knife. I think it was a knife, and attacks him, trying to kill him. And at that moment, Tubal-Cain, he thinks he's about to win over Noah, and he says as he's about to kill him, "Your women, your beasts, and the Ark are all mine." And it's like he's representing the demons in this instance. I think this is the idea that the descendants of Cain, the demons, can penetrate the Ark, the holy Ark, and take over that power and become the god. So anyway, I don't even know if Aronofsky really knew what he was doing there, or if that was just one of those things where people get inspired by the same entities that I've been inspired by. Even Tubal-Cain itself is like a password in Freemasonry. Definitely, I think that the Freemasons are tapping into this vein of mysticism having to do with the Cainites. And what it is, basically, Freemasonry is all about building. Not just physically building buildings, but also mystically building through magical processes, building reality, creating reality, molding the energies in order to transform the universe around you. I think that they're conducting ritual magic. And I don't think most of them even realize this, but I think that's really what they're doing.
It was so crazy, the things that I heard from this that she's getting, and the things that would pique your curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it goes, you got to ask Baphomet, refer to you. So Baphomet sounds like almost like a mishmash egregore that the Templars made a long time ago.
It was kind of assigned to them because they were said to originally worship the head of John the Baptist.
Well, they would they use it as a Ouija board. That's what they're using, that head. And they had these skulls all over the place. I've also heard correlated something with these crosses they had, they could communicate. You know when you're talking about communicating over distances with those, I'm blanking on the name. You said up top, what the hell are they called? Hold on, it's written down here. Dolmens.
But they were more like places that people would congregate. The elite priest would congregate. But I think the seance thing and all that Ouija board stuff, I did try it when I was younger and stuff got a bit out of hand. But the thing that I would say about that is don't do it at home.
Yeah, who would do that?
I mean, you are inviting. You see, the thing is, when powerful entities come through, they can take possession of the person. It's a very dangerous thing to do if you open yourself up to any of this stuff, in my opinion, which is really what I think the Essenes were saying that. You know, the Nag Hammadi texts refer to this a lot as the Archons, but the Archons means leaders or rulers, but it's also about this omnipresent thing going on, the light and the darkness. And there is a tendency for people who were born into the aristocracy to get into the occult.
Christopher Lee said you're going to go nuts if you get into that shit.
Yes.
Because people thought he had some occult library. He's like, I don't. And he goes, if you get into that, you will lose your sanity, your soul. He says it's a clip you can find easily.
It's well known that you have a huge interest in the occult and one of the largest collections of books.
I don't have a huge collection. Somebody wrote I had 20,000 books. I'd have to live in a bath. I have The Devil Rides Out, first edition, signed to me by Dennis Wheatley. There's a book just come out about him called The Devil is a Gentleman. And I have met people who claimed to be Satanists, who claimed to be involved with black magic, who claimed that they not only knew a lot about it, but as I said, I've certainly never been involved, and I warn all of you, never, never, never. You will not only lose your mind, you lose your soul.
Yes, I've seen it.
Oh, the reason I brought up her, Tracy Twyman. So at the point when she's talking to the Baphomet, this weird hermaphrodite, who's probably Kybel and some other shit mashed together. I think it's almost like corporations, these fucking entities. It was telling her she was supposed to help this DeVere guy, the surviving DeVere, who was trying to put his book out, okay? And you can find videos of him talking about the DeVere family line on the internet.
Today's guest is an old friend and a very influential writer, Prince Nicholas de Vere von Drakenberg, author of the books The Dragon Seed and The Dragon Legacy. He refers to himself as the sovereign prince of an entity called Drakenberg, as well as the sovereign head of an organization called the Imperial and Royal Dragon Court. This is made up of people who claim descent from a collection of royal bloodlines related to de Vere's family. They all have titles recognized by the court as having standing in the sovereign kingdom of Drakenberg. Now, de Vere's work deals with several fascinating subjects, but today I decided to focus on this concept of Drakenberg, which I'll allow him to explain. I mean, I'm saying, okay, you refer to yourself as a sovereign of some sort. You say you're the king of the dragons. What does that mean?
I don't say king. Prince of the Dragons is something that has slowly sort of been foisted on me in terms of responsibility for other people.
Is that like, is that a historical title, or, yeah, what exactly does that mean?
But yes, the Dragon Princes, you'll find them universally.
It's not a single title that one person holds at each time. There's several of them?
Yeah, I would count amongst the Dragon Princes Alexander de Bathory, Prince Christophe de Sade, Anwar Agad, Arif Akhundzada of Pakistan. There is now an International Council of Princes which has been recently formed. We are also applying for Royal Academy in East Africa, and then more people will come on board. So yes, there are quite a few Dragon Princes about. It's just I'm having to be coordinating them.
So from what I understand about reading your writings, you're saying that you and these other princes in your organization, the Dragon Court, you're sort of carrying on, I guess, the oldest traditions of royalty and kingship and sovereignty and things like that. You're saying that your ancestors were the original kings, the source of regality, and you're carrying on the same traditions. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely true, yes. We are de Vere, are possibly the oldest dynasty in Eurasia, or Western Eurasia. The name was first used in 400 BC by King Vere, who was what they call a brief, or a custodian of the wisdom of the dragon. He established kingdom in what was called Pictavia by the Scots, northern Pictavia, which is now Scotland. They reigned there up until around about 740 AD with the birth of Melesiana de Seath. She then carried the dragon tradition on in France, and Sigismund picked it up from their King Sigismund, founded his dragon court in Hungary, and several others in Serbia, Croatia, Romania, and so on. So yes, we do carry that tradition, and the dragon princes are custodians of their own dynastic traditions, and I overall am custodian of all the traditions.
What is the significance of the dragon symbolism, symbolizing, I guess, the origin of this race and the source of the power that it represents? I remember you saying in your book that you can trace that back to the Sumerian figure of Tiamat, the original dragon goddess, who sort of represented the chaos out of which the universe was created.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you exactly?
The symbol of the dragon.
Yes, in connection to what you're doing.
Transcendent consciousness.
Okay.
The ability to clear the mind. Let's have a look at the word dragon. The word dragon comes from the Greek edrakon, which is what they call an aorist, or a verb that hasn't got a past, present, or future tense. It's just a verb. Of the word dokesthai, which is a word which simply means to see clearly. Now, that means that the word dragon simply means one who sees clearly. The idea of kingship, or the word, let's have a look at the word king. King means to see clearly, and dragon means to see clearly. So therefore, dragon king is a bit of a tautology, really, because dragon and king are the same thing, or dragon and prince, the first. The symbol of the dragon for me represents, firstly, you have the serpentine quality of it, which has always been associated with healing, with the spinal column and cerebral cortex and so on. Secondly, as a serpentine figure with wings, it shows that that healing power, or the healing of the mind, has transformed the individual, who now has a higher overview of life through clarity than perhaps other people do. And this is why they were chosen as kings, and this is why, through social engineering for millennia, it was hoped to ensure that that clarity of vision would become hereditary. That's what the symbol means to me.
The stories of your ancestors, the oldest ones, the ones that I guess could be identified with the gods of the ancient world, seems like, and I'm just generalizing a whole lot, because we're talking about different figures from all sorts of different cultures throughout history, yeah. But in general we see the same themes in the myths surrounding these figures, that the original race that they came from, the original royal race, is something beyond what we consider to be human now, and that they came from some sort of other world, something that isn't the Earth that we know today, that they had some sort of transcendent quality to them that was non-earthly and non-human. Is that correct?
Yes, we are doing research now, Mark Pinkham and I, into the origins of the Anunnaki way back nearly 40,000 years now, 10,000 years before the hybridization of humanity, to possibly Kashmir. They seem to be linked very, very closely with the sons of Shiva, or the Jats, of whom the main king was Sanat Kumrai, who seems to be the first Grail king in human form, so to speak. The place that Shiva came to Earth, which is very much like the falling to Earth of Lucifer, was in what they now call Shangri-La, with this otherworldly situation. If you go way, way, way back, then you're talking about extraterrestrial life, then that can possibly be explained by the visitation of comets, which is now part of the seeding theory, which is quite popular. Mm-hmm. But for our people, we have always been associated with Shangri-La, the Elysian Fields, Arcadia, Tirna Nog, Anwin, which is basically death from the other world. All the ancient legends say that we appeared 450,000 years ago from another level of being, or another level of consciousness that is coterminous and mutually occupational with this planet and with the consciousness that we generally perceive it with. So it's something on a different wavelength, if you like. Now, is this the same concept as Drakenberg that you write about, and you I guess, consider yourself the sovereign of Drakenberg? Very much so. The incorporeality of it is intended as a memorial to concepts like the Elysian Fields, like Arcadia, Tirna Nog, and the other world. Well, who came up with that? Who came up with that term? What's the historical origin of Drakenberg? I know there's Drakensberg mountains in Africa, but where specifically did Drakenberg originate from? It's a Germano-Hungarian name. I've got a cousin, Ellen, over in Holland, from the House of Holland, and she isn't a von Drakenberg, she's a van Drakenberg, from the Hungarian side. What's an example of someone using it in the same way you're using it, or are you the one who originated using it in that way? I'm the one that originated using it in that way, but I was given it by one of the houses of Austria as what you might call a titular nominative, or a name title, based on an extinct Landkreis within their realm of authority. But as nothing in this life happens by coincidence, Drakenberg very, very quickly became associated with the union of opposites, if you wish, or with the concept of alchemy and so on, as it has gone on, and as people have perceived it, written about it, or contacted me about it. So it has this very otherworldly theme to it, because if you think of the Berg and the Draken as the male and the female put together, very much like in the symbol of Levy's Baphomet, then you have the negation of both the male and the female, the being and the doing. And that leaves you with the transcendent consciousness that allows you to perceive life as it really is. And that life is Kether in Malkuth, heaven on earth. It's, again, Tirna Nog or Anwin or Arcadia or whatever. It's Eden, the perfected state of consciousness.
And he's going on about martial vampirism versus the kind they would do and this and that. And I had this guy, I'm forgetting his last name, Chris, on a couple episodes ago, who knew all these people. This DeVere guy was a loser and a drug addict. I think he died homeless. But he was of that royal blood. Chris Knowles. Chris Knowles, really interesting, really fucking interesting guy. And even Tracy Twyman, who was saying, Chris Knowles was like warning her not to get, she was very curious, okay? And she'd say, like, atheists won't try the Ouija board with you because they don't believe in that shit, right? But they also want to mess with it. And also, Religious people are like, I'm not going to do that, so no one will do it to see what happens. No one will do it. So she just did it. And when you listen to her talk about it, it's fascinating and horrifying because you're like, at no point, as you might expect, like, you know, I've accepted Christ probably 17 times in the first quarter of fiscal year 2024 alone. Like the first sign of trouble, I would, if I was messing around with that stuff, I would immediately be like, oh, Jesus, help me. Like, I wouldn't even have
exactly,
any
because the Holy Spirit does work. I mean, I think that this brings in an interesting point about governing systems. The demonic realm has a governing system.
Very legalistic, yes.
Yeah.
To the letter. In fact,
and the retribution and the way that the entities entrap you has to be through your own consent, which is where it's very similar to elements of the legal system with the blood, the birth certificate, the giving away of the child to the state. It's a very similar thing. It's like a pact. It's a blood oath. So you need to take a blood oath. And you mentioned that earlier on about blood.
I wasn't allowed to do that.
The life force of the being. And of course, in a lot of voodoo type cultures, I'm saying voodoo type, you know, which is that's a mixture of black magic and Catholicism. But these sort of cults, they depend on being able to control you through the blood and, more importantly, psychologically.
That's how they get rights. That's the thing I find the most fascinating. The almost like banal kind of adherence to the letter of the law. Like these things are two-dimensional. Like
they work through a system. They work in a hierarchical system, and that is all you need to know, because the truly powerful ones will not come through.
The thing with Trump is it shows you how much the president does not control. It shows you right there how in charge the president is. You don't have to. I already know there's 8 levels of classified above his fucking head. So to me, that means your vote don't count with the president. That's all that means to me, because there's 8 levels above him that maybe aren't going to tell him what's up. The president, the most powerful man in the world. Well, he's not. The most powerful man in the world is not that powerful. Yeah. You know what reminds me of when years ago I went to ECW wrestling in Philly. And this is before they came out and admitted it was scripted, you know? Vince McMahon broke kayfabe, as they call it. Yeah. And I remember, so I'm like 19, and I mean, I knew it was, I don't know what degree it was fake, but, you know, I was an adult at that point enough to know. But I remember seeing these two rivals, the Sandman and Raven, getting into a van together out back and I'm like, you know what? I'll bet Raven didn't kidnap that guy's son. He kidnapped his son. They have to take a bus back together. So when I wasn't a big wrestler, but my friends were into it, and we went to ECW, you're up close to the ring. And this guy knew it was like bring your own weapons night. So we brought like a baking tray and a stop sign. And New Jack, the wrestler, used it to hit somebody. It was like that. Yeah. But you're being drawn into it. Was almost, I remember at the time, I was like, it was probably like the same energy as a lynch mob, but no one was dying. So it was like positive, you know? Like, but the whole crowd, you get way into it. That's like what magic, I mean, that's what occult is. That's what that creep LeVay was all about, was dividing the world into carnies and rubes.
Well, that's twisted stuff. I mean, we're talking about something very innocent here, really. I mean,
well, that's the snake in Eden every time. There's something's good, then the subtlest of all the creatures has to come in and say some bullshit and then ruin it. I mean, it's like a repeating theme. So, in fact, I learned from your website first. Something unrelated. I'm watching John Lear, Roger Lear, the alien guy, the new Bob Lazar. And he goes, and I'm watching some interview with him. He's old as shit. And he goes, he saw these crazy things that I want to hear something crazy. Honestly, I don't want to be bored. So that's why I love when you making fun of allegory and shit and these stupid fucking orders. Like, oh, more allegory.
Oh, yeah,
great.
It's just to draw people in. It's energy harvesting. Yeah.
And you could feel it. I could feel the energy drain out of me the second I'm not hearing a simple truth being said. You could feel it, the drainingness of it, you know? But anyway, he goes, there's 40 planets in the solar system. I looked it up, and you technically could say that, but okay. The surface of the moon, if you're on it, the sky looks yellow. He's just saying crazy shit.
It's a spaceship. It was built on Jupiter about 38 million years ago. And between the time it was built and 15,000 years ago, it's been touring around our solar system. Our solar system, we're told by NASA there's 9 planets. There's actually 40. There's the Earth plus 39. And each of those planets has a civilization. And each of those planets has moons that have civilizations. It was made on Jupiter.
By who? By what race?
By, I don't know.
It's race, yeah.
And it's been towed around the different moons doing exactly what it's doing now. And that is monitoring whoever lives on there and abducting or doing whatever it is they would like to do. Now, it doesn't have its own propulsion. It has to be towed. And our moon was towed towed into its orbit now about 15,000 years ago, just after the Ice Age, the last Ice Age. And when man first became aware of the moon, or aware of skies, there was no moon, and then there was 2 moons, and then there was 1 moon. And we think that the 2 moons was the vehicle that towed our moon into space. The daytime sky the color is saffron yellow. And
I heard about this, yeah.
And I wrote to him and sent him 6 shades of saffron yellow and asked him to put an X on the shade closest to the daytime color. That's another reason why we didn't go to the moon, because NASA, all their photos are black skies. The basic misunderstanding that we all are infused with by NASA is the sun is hot. It's not hot. It may look hot, but it doesn't broadcast any heat. You'll remember when the first astronauts went up that they made a great point of saying that they had to rotate the vehicles, the modules, to keep from burning up. So that it didn't get to, actually, there is no heat coming from the sun, so you'll notice that nobody had to rotate. The International Space Station doesn't have to rotate because there's no heat from the sun. What there is coming from the sun is an electromagnetic wave, and this wave is changed from, it goes through our atmosphere, and our atmosphere changes the temperature of the atmosphere inside the Earth.
And he goes, no, we can't go explore. The whole solar system is under, how do you put it? It's like under the rule of the serpent race. No, I never heard of that shit. The serpent. Like, what the fuck's a serpent race?
Well, he's pulling stuff out. I mean, the thing is that he doesn't know that, of course, but it draws people in as a story.
Okay, but it drew me in, and then the serpent race. I'm like, well, that's not the
no, it's much more practical than that because it's on Earth.
But then I look it up, and no, yeah, we are ruled by the serpent race. That's those Sons of Cain dipshits. The people
That's right,
that think
the Sons of Cain. Yeah,
they think that you're the line of Seth and they're the line of Cain. And they call it the serpent race because somehow the serpent got Eve. Now, actually, in occult rituals, it could be some Moonchild situation where even though Adam's the one doing the pushing, the Nahash is the one. Like, if you watch this guy Nathan Reynolds, I don't know where he is now. He's like off the grid, but this dude's story is crazy. And I got to tell you, he's given me so many good loose threads to pull that I consider all his crazy things he said, which are crazy as hell. Things that, like, I have to consider the possibility of dragons being real now. I don't know if I'm prepared for that. But anyway,
yeah,
he said these people that do this shit that go back, way back with their cult lines, and a lot of them in America, because, America is the land of the plumed serpent, Amaru, that Peruvian god. That's where we got that. Amerigo Vespucci changed his name to match that shit. It's not named after some random guy. It's after Amaru. Okay, and early, like, Joseph Smith types that came here, these like warlock charlatans. Well, they're all like treasure hunt. Remember the treasure hunting fads of going back to John Dee, where we need to go back to that system where the banks are buried treasure. And anyway, his Reynolds is the Reynolds rap family, not the tobacco, even though they're connected. But his grandfather or his great grandfather built the new torch for the Statue of Liberty, which is that Mithra initiation. It's a dude in drag is what that is, by the way. And his family, his background's horrible, or how he describes it. And Lake Havasu, which, like the city of London, is one of those. In fact, I think they say they're under the authority of the city of London or some shit, and they have like a red dragon.
It is. They've got the red dragon and the silver or white dragon, and they're like two opposites of the same side in a way. But it goes back to mythology. The city of London is one of the most
other one.
interesting places. If you ever go UK again, just go and walk around the city of London for a day. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's real dark shit. And Lake Havasu, the London Bridge is there. Now, according to Nathan, the guy that brought it in is the guy, by the way, designed Disneyland. That occult creep. And Lake Havasu, according to Nathan, is it looks like retirees go with their grandkids, but they actually have sex tourism for children there mostly. It's run by the Knights of Columbus and something else. And his that London Bridge, I guess, he said London Bridge is falling down is about how they used to do immurement, where they bury you alive in the bridge. So when they were transporting it over, they found kids' toys and shit. I don't know what years they were burying people alive in that bridge, but this guy wanted it because it was so negatively charged an object. That's why he wanted it. I didn't know when I was there that was a thing. I found this out way later. It was 2011. I was in England. But I would like to go check it out because the original Mithras temple from Roman times.
Oh, yeah, that's there. That's
Michael Bloomberg's rebuilding it. Michael Bloomberg from here.
Yes,
he bought
Well, they're obsessed with this stuff, but in a way, as I said, they're fake elites. They're not that interesting. But the city of London and the occult symbolism there is really fascinating.
I remembered that during my 2005 London visit, me and my husband at the time, Brian Albert, had quite accidentally come across the remains of a Roman temple of Mithras, a Persian god who was imported into the empire early, but whose worship later became the dominant religion right at the empire's end. Mithras is mentioned in at least 3 of my nonfiction books in several different contexts. One of the things I've noted is that Aleister Crowley thought that the name of Baphomet should be properly translated to, quote, Father Mithras. However, I hadn't taken this explanation very seriously before, only because I really didn't know enough about Mithras. The Temple of Mithras that we found in London was literally just sitting there, fixed into the pavement in the middle of a courtyard outside. All that was left of it were the foundations and a few stacked stone bricks left over from the walls. The plaque next to it said that it had been moved from its original location down the street to make room for an office building. I remember how shocked we were that something which seemed so historically significant had been so badly restored and displayed. The bricks even seemed poorly laid. My husband seemed offended at this. So when I started writing my novel, I decided to look up the location of the Temple of Mithras again. That's where I hit the mother lode. For as it turns out, the temple has been restored to its original location, with a new office building now being formed around it, which will be unveiled later this year. This is being done by Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York and 6th richest man in the world, worth 30 times more than Queen Elizabeth. He's purchased the original site to build his company's new European headquarters there. This complex, which consists of 2 buildings connected with a sky bridge, was originally intended to be called Bloomberg Place. But I've spoken to the press office and learned that they now want to refer to it as, quote, Bloomberg London. Over the last few months, I have done tons of research about this location, about Michael Bloomberg, and about Mithraism. It all fit in perfectly with the story I was already writing, so I decided to use Bloomberg as the basis for my story's main villain, Blake Rosenberg, and his new building as the basis for the location of my story's most important scenes. The villain's relationship to Bloomberg is only skeletal, and the character is truly fictional. There are some similar traits and life histories between the 2 figures. However, I would like to stress that most of the criminal and deviant sexual activity that my character engages in are episodes wholly invented by me for storytelling purposes. I have no evidence that Michael Bloomberg has ever been involved in any of these things, or that his properties have been used for rituals involving child rape and murder. I also have no evidence that Mr. Bloomberg has any interest in occultism, alchemy, philosophy, or surrealist art, like my character Rosenberg. Bloomberg's building is not going to be, as far as I know, an apparatus harvesting body fluids for alchemical operations, as the building in my story is used for. However, Bloomberg London is supposed to be, quote, the smartest building in Europe, built to generate its own energy and even share it with nearby buildings. Bloomberg's building will itself be a completely integrated AI system that will watch the employees' every move, even monitor their every heartbeat, supposedly to anticipate their needs for energy efficiency.
The digital ceiling is coming, and it's going to really reshape how buildings are done. The first stepping stone to get to the digital ceiling is through your lighting, because lighting is so prevalent. They're about every 8 feet in every single building, whether it's an office, a hospital, or retail. Even a manufacturing or warehouse floor has lights. You attach sensors to those lights, and you connect those sensors to other building networks. Could be your HVAC, could be security, and you've got some great opportunities there.
Things like being able to beacon in a room and signal an emergency condition. Things like, in the future, these lights will have sensors that go beyond the lighting room because things are blurring. Think about a light fixture now that has a digital imaging sensor.
But, to my knowledge, the closest thing to body energy harvesting there will be in the form of treadmills that are hooked up to generators. The Temple of Mithras will be housed in the main floor of the main building, with its own entrance, accessible to the public. I'm really glad that Bloomberg has done this, because the Temple of Mithras is acknowledged as one of the most significant ancient Roman finds ever. It was discovered by accident in 1954 while they were constructing the office building known as Bucklersbury House.
On Londoners' doorsteps, under their doorsteps in fact, have been discovered the ruins of a Roman temple where 2,000 years ago the conquerors of Britain came to worship their god Mithras. A marble bust of the god, unearthed and taken to the British Museum, is comparatively unharmed after 20 centuries.
At the time, the City of London could not afford to keep the site open for restoration, or even to explore it properly. So after the main contents were removed, construction on the office building proceeded just 2 weeks later, amid protests. When Bloomberg began his current project, which will be the building with the largest mass in all of London, many more temple artifacts were discovered, including a set of wooden writing tablets that have now been dubbed, quote, the Bloomberg tablets by historians. It's agreed that his restoration of the temple not only places it once again on its original spot, but recreates it beautifully, and as accurately as possible. From what I understand, the statues of deities found there, including not only Mithras but also Hades and Mercury, will be on display there, and the altar has been restored. Now let's talk a little bit about the location itself. I figured it must have some esoteric significance, and it didn't take me long to find plenty. I believe that this was the most holy site in Roman London, and that it remains the spiritual center of London's financial power.
Later, I'm watching Gary Wayne talk about the Lord of the Rings guy. I'm forgetting his name like an idiot. But the author of Lord of the Rings, you know.
Yes.
Tolkien.
Tolkien.
Tolkien's one of those old bloodlines names, the Tolks. And That's an Atlantis overlay. It's like a metaphorical overlay for Atlantis.
And so we see Tolkien show up at Oxford, which is very unusual because the story is he doesn't have any nobility or royal bloodlines. But in the 1920s and 30s, you're not going to see DEI or other things that are promoting the poor or the non-nobility to go to one of the highest ranks, if not the highest ranked university in England, and some would say around the world, put it in that same classification. So there's no way he should be there if there isn't more to the story. And so he's also going to join a writing society called the Inkling Society, which is a Rosicrucian society. So if you're not already an adept in the mysteries, you're not going to be invited to a Rosicrucian society, or you're not going. And if you're lower on the bloodlines, you still have to be invited to go there. And they're not going to teach the non-genealogically associated bloodlines with the type of knowledge that they're going to deliver. So what the heck is somebody who we can't even trace to be in Freemasonry, the lowest level of the hierarchies, going to the Rosicrucian, which is at the midpoint and the nexus point to the pure bloods of the Royals with the rising lower bloodlines of the Freemasonry, first level of adept, Illuminati above that, and then into the Rosicrucians, where the top half of the Rosicrucians would be Royals or bloodlines. So how does he get there? And the other thing we need to sort of look at is he there to learn knowledge, or is he there to develop the writing style? And the writing style is called mythopoetic, and it's similar to a fairy tale. And they use the eucatastrophe again, just as polytheists call the Bible a fairy tale, and with the eucatastrophe, so that Christians don't have to suffer the idea that Jesus died and wasn't resurrected. So that's the polytheist version, not the monotheist version. Just so we see the distinction in what I'm talking about here. And I'm a monotheist, so. And that you have to be an adept of the mysteries to understand all the allegories and the names that are encoded to understand the full story. So that's the interpretive approach that they lay over onto the Bible as they pull that into their sort of belief system and reimagine what it says. So mythopoetic is kind of like a fairy tale, where it's based on history, but writing a fiction. So people might remember the Da Vinci Code. It's a similar kind of style where it's a fiction, but it's based on real people or real bloodlines or ancient bloodlines, and has all of the belief system of polytheism, plus genealogies, plus their gods being encoded into it. So it's an encapsulation of their history in plain sight. But for the rest of us, we sort of look at it and say, well, this is really great entertainment. And that's what they want, so that they can sort of prepare you with this sort of knowledge. So that's the mythopoetic style that both Lewis and Tolkien participated in. Of course, they were of great friends. But we're going to focus on Tolkien today and Lord of the Rings. So his family actually moves to England, and they migrate either from Normandy or to Germany, or both, depending on how the migrations of the families go. And the name Tolkien shows up in Normandy with the invasion of the Rollos clan. And the Rollo has a bloodline that goes back to Odin. And they believe that they are the direct descendants of Odin, or as we would understand it in the Celtic religion, Cernunnos, the horn hunting god, or Hern would be the other version. And Cern is also a god that is in the Etruscan, the Proto-Latin religion, and the Proto-Roman religion and people. And Cern is an Indo-Aryan word, which can be spelled C-E-R-N or K-E-R-N, which means a horn-headed god. So just so we understand the bloodline in terms of, if he is a royal, how he will take his genealogical basis back to. And if he's of a pure royal bloodline, then he does not need to go through the lower ranks. He is going to be initiated into the mysteries with knowledge from childhood. So now that starts to explain, if he is a royal, what he is doing at this mid-level thalamic tree organizational structure of the trunk organizations in a Rosicrucian society, and a writing society, which is sort of akin to the same writing society that Francis Bacon, a Rosicrucian, begat with to develop the English language that becomes the language for the KJV Bible, or Baconian English, as I like to call it. And he's going to set up two writing guilds, one being the Knights of the Helmet Society, and the other one being Spear Shaker Society. And of course, the gods that they're honoring in the Spear Shaker Society are, Athena and Apollo, who had a spear and would shake it as a weapon. Now, there's a lot of, we won't spend any time on this, there's a lot of connections between Bacon and Shakespeare, but you can understand if it was somebody that was set up as a front for Bacon's writing, it's just an anagram, simple anagram of his belief system as a Rosicrucian. So, but if you look at the Shakespeare writings, it's a form of that mythopoetic style again, doing the same thing. This is the style that goes back to the Romans with, works like Ovides. It goes back to the great classics of the Greek. So similar kind of style. It's evolving as it goes, and it may be a little bit further away from the actual truth and a little bit more allegorized into more acceptable modern storytelling, but it still has everything based in their belief systems as we talked about. So has this knowledge. So he's just there to learn how to do the writing craft, just as a craft is part of the arts and the sciences, which is the Gnostic religion, the knowledge cult that comes out of the 7 sacred sciences that created mysticism. And again, that's part of what I write about in book 1 of that whole history in terms of Enochian mysticism, son of Cain, that I like to talk about. So He is of the bloodline of Toki, which is rooted in Thor. If you take that etymology and genealogy back, and of course we know Thor is a son of Odin. So he has this inside knowledge, and so Tolkien actually means sort of son of Tok, as you take that etymology back. So he's even the name is reflecting another level. So he's there because he's already an adept. He may not have an adept title because as a pureblood, you're not allowed to take an adept title sometime between 25 and 30. And so sometimes they're called a 32nd degree adept at that level. I mean, and not to be confused with the York Society, which has first level adept at 3rd degree, and then it goes higher after that. Scottish Rite divides that 3 degrees 11 times to come up with 33 degree to be first level of adept. So 32nd degree is still mundane. So there's 2 terms, one for the mundane, that's sort of the misinformation that we get out of the Scottish Rite, and the other one is way beyond 3rd degree, way beyond 7th degree that likely Rosicrucian is. We're talking a royale level that is, I think, goes up to somewhere close to 33. Some people say up to 100, but I think when they're talking about 100, I think they're using the Scottish Rite divisions to kind of get there. But the old wood system is the one that I tend to focus on. So 33 tends to be a very important number in the old system and the top level. So he has the credentials to be at the society that everybody sort of overlooks.
In fact, half of these wackadoo religions, like Mormonism, that is a metaphorical overlay for some Atlantis shit. They retell this Atlantis thing over and over, and I'm sure you could call it a bunch of names, but the thing of having this world governance and the one before the Tower of Babel ruined it for them, and that's the thing that Twitter and all these things reminded me of the most, was the Tower of Babel, where the thing that's going to connect us all, suddenly nobody can understand each other anymore, the meaning of words. It just reminds me so much of that. And it feels like they've been trying to conquer that problem for a long time of how do we get everybody connected again? Maybe it's a brain chip or, the most basic occult magic, like the first part was like lying. That's the first reality altering magic there is. And then there's degrees. You could take it all. And then once you get enough people chained together and observing it, you can really affect reality. There's the low magic,
the television's an ideal thing for that, because without the television, there wouldn't be terrorism.
That's right.
There wouldn't be any terrorism if we didn't have television. They could never get away with what they do without the television.
Yeah. Well, if I was a dark occultist, I would call that the plane of cause. I would buy a newspaper or a TV station, and that would be my plane of cause to affect my dark will and then cause effects in the real world. Because now I got everybody's view on this thing, and now you got to perceive what I want you to perceive. The Tartaria video I loved, because
we took that one apart because that was another psychology. Talk about mud floods, Tartaria. They all latch on to the same thing, but Tartaria was a real place and it was a real empire. So Tartaria, the real Tartaria, was a massive landmass which covered all of modern-day Russia, went to China, down to India, and what was called Mongolia. We're going to get into that as we go along. We're going to be talking about Anatoly Fomenko, who is a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences. He is an artist and historian, and he started finding old maps which told a very different story. Now, we've talked about how landmasses have actually had their names changed. Look at modern-day Israel, for example. Those names are new names. They are not from the times of the biblical history, which they are supposed to represent. And as we look at landmasses all over the world, we find this. So it wasn't just the Romans that changed the names of places and named them. For instance, modern day Romania was Dacia, then we had Thrace. These were massive areas. And then we found out that we had massive movements of people who were interconnected civilizations that went across all of these areas and right up to the Indus Valley. So we talked about the Vincha culture. We also talked about the Scythians, who went all the way through what's known as the Asian steppe, which came originally from Persia all the way up to the Indus Valley, through Mongolia, even into modern day Ukraine. So when we talk about civilizations rising and falling, maybe we should be thinking more about civilizations integrating and conglomerating. This makes a lot more sense. And this is really what Anatoly Fomenko is saying in his writings.
Right. And but it's not the way it's portrayed to people.
No, it's not. It was a real place. It's on the old maps.
It's actually very interesting. And I would tell people to watch a video on it, because I just want to hear something I haven't heard before. When I start hearing the buzz phrases and shit over and over, like mud flood, and I'm like, are you joking?
Oh no!
The one where nuclear weapons don't exist.
By that? Yeah, it's like it's former NLP. They just come out with this stuff, and you get a kickback from it as well, because the people who've bought into it hate you for pointing out that there was a real place.
Yeah, no, people want you to be a quack. I mean, they want it. They'll feel cheated. That's the old lady relationship with the TV preacher.
Yep.
Or even like Mike Epps used to have a joke about it, about when the housing collapse happened. He goes, old ladies were like snapping out of the Holy Spirit. You're like, did he just pass that plate again? Because they know to some degree the show they're at. Wrestling fans know it's fake. They just like it.
Yeah.
So they expect their dollar's worth of show. So as long as you're fulfilling that, they're not going to be mad at you. Do you know what I mean? You got to fulfill your showmanship. They paid their money. These old ladies want a certain show they're going to get. It's not like a stripper. It's like a spiritual thing, but they want that show. They know you're full of shit, a lot of them.